Guys, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you both. First, a few very short introductions. We have Duchess Nena, West African vegan chef supreme, educator, editor of Vegan Melanated, and also author of multiple cookbooks. But this one is my personal favourite, Igbo Vegan. Aww. Check it out. I love it. It's the favourite in my household. And also joined by Stephane Kotto, founder of the Pan-African Plant-Based Food African Alliance. I think I've slightly got that wrong.
There's one word additional here. It's just Pan-African Plant-Based Alliance.
That's what it is. The founder of, and also author of this fantastic book, which I haven't had a chance to look through yet, but From Soil to Soul, African Vegan Recipes. And these are Pan-African recipes, right?
Correct, yeah.
So guys, amazing books here. Have you ever met before?
No, actually it's odd, actually.
Yeah.
Because we should we should have, because our paths should have crossed a long time ago.
But I think thank you for bringing us now. So thank you for that.
Yeah. I am delighted and honoured that I've managed to bring you together for this conversation. We're going to get straight into it. And the question I'm going to open with is inspired by my dear sister and friend's book, which is Can Feminism Be African? By Mina Salami, one of my good friends. And so our question today is, can veganism be African? Discuss. So, who would like to kick us off? Nenna, would you like to kick us off?
Most definitely can be African. I think obviously with the media and how everything has been obviously happening all the years, there's this kind of, will I say, image in people's minds. When you say veganism, it's a certain image. But unfortunately, that's not really the only image that there should be. I think we've had this discussion before. When I was writing my book, I had to do quite a lot of research. And I realized that the people who actually come from the African background eat more vegan food, more plant-based than we're eating now. So even though it has come to be, and people expect to see Africans as big meat eaters, it was never like that in the past. And I feel like most of that has been as a result of colonization and, will I say, cultural exchange, travel. Everything's been influenced by what people have picked up and brought back into the society. So us now saying that veganism is a foreign thing to Africa is actually kind of like looking at things backwards. Like a friend of mine would say, hustling backwards, because we actually were the original, will I say, vegans before it became more popular or more, will I say, trendy. Westernized and trendy. 100%. So definitely it can be.
Stefan.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, first of all, because, growing up, I was born and raised in Africa, never heard the word, I think even vegetarian, never heard of it.
In Cameroon?
In Cameroon, yes, absolutely. Then moved here, to France first, and then to the UK. And it was very late in my life that I heard the word vegan. And what I had in my mind was what she was talking about, those stereotypes, right? That, veganism
we're talking
is
like
these...
skinny, white, health-based influencer.
You said it.
I'm going to say
tree hugging.
I'm going to say
I was trying not to, but hey.
So that's the female. That's the female version. Then you have the male hipster kind of guy. Yeah. I love Hackney. Don't get me wrong, especially with what you've done. But we all know, those fancy vegan cafes with avocado toast, £25, all these kind of things. So I used to have that stereotype until I became a vegan, and then I looked into it like she did for her book. And when you look at the history, you realize that, there's nothing new here on all aspects. So within veganism, sometimes we like to talk about health, but also the environment and ethics with animal rights. And when we do research, we realize that, in fact, today and before Africa in general is the continent that actually consumes the less amount of animal products, especially meats. There's almost no dairy. That's not a thing really, dairy products. And maybe there's a bit of eggs here, but in general, compared to the West, I mean, no one eats more meat than, America, for example, or the UK. So we consume less animal product, first of all. Then in terms of colonization, she mentioned it, in fact, because before colonization, people eat mostly plant-based food over there for many reasons. It could be also for economic reasons. Sometimes, meat actually is more expensive than plant-based products, but also because of, ethical reason and environmental reason. These are not principles that only exist in the West. And I think there's this misconception that somehow it just come up from here, perhaps because the word vegan was actually introduced here in the UK in, I think, 1944. But we have ITIL, for example, in Jamaica, right? So what is ITIL? That's exactly that. And what are the reasons behind it? It's spiritual, environmental. It's like it's a holistic point of view, right? And if we go even further back, when we look at even back to ancient Egypt in general, so it was called Kemet back then, and they had this sort of commandment, which is by Ma'at. I don't know if you heard of that. So it's kind of like a guiding principles.
The M-A-A-T.
Correct, absolutely. Yeah. And one of the commandments says, "Thou shalt not kill." Right? What does it mean? It means you shouldn't kill unless it's necessary. And that is pretty much what veganism is about. And that was over 5,000 years ago. So we already had African people, long time before it was trendy, thinking about the ethical aspect and about killing animals and this kind of things. So, it's nothing new. And even after that, with I think it was the Mali Empire, they had like the same sort of chart. Did you say chart? No. How do you call that? Sort of commandment again. And one of them also mentioned how we should respect, the environment and animals and all that stuff. And that was, 100 years ago. So point is, from an ethical point of view, from a health point of view, and from an environmental point of view, people have been eating plant-based food a long time ago, and there's nothing new.
How did Sister ask, but you're going to add to this, I'm sure. So how did colonization change that? How did they influence it on the ground? How did that happen?
It's a great question. Sorry, go ahead. Do you want to start?
So before I answer that, I was going to mention, like most African cultures worshipped animals and believed that animals were like reincarnation of their ancestors. So it also influenced the spiritualization regarding eating meat and stuff. And meat, even though they call them hunter-gatherers, they were, if you think about the, the agricultural scene, they were mostly farmers and they were farming plants. They weren't really rearing animals. So if you actually do go by that, you will see like traces of that in the sort of food that we eat. For example, like roasted corn, roasted plantains, like vegetables and stuff. And when they did eat meat, it would be a thing where they will honor the animal. And it wasn't like it was on special occasions and even thank the animal for giving up the life to be eaten. So it wasn't like a thing where people were just out there just
willy-nilly eating meat, breakfast, lunch, dinner.
Do you understand what I'm saying? Because if you think about the process of actually hunting, getting the meat, killing it and stuff. So, and most of the animals that are in Africa now were actually brought in, they traveled in. And for them to move from one place to the other, it took a long time. So even if they said, okay, we eat meat, the volume of meat eaten now is nowhere near. And if you look at history, meat eating was mainly something that the West had because they didn't really have that much of, plant agriculture. So to compare the two cultures in that way, you would be able to notice that. And then, sorry, I forgot what you asked me.
Colonization, how did it change the diet specifically? How did that happen and in what way? And how did it, become so widespread, the change in the diet?
Sorry, do you want to say something?
Okay. Yeah. So for me, what I would say is with colonization, it was a thing where, will I say, people saw that the white men were eating plenty of meat, and the more meat you had, the more affluent you seemed. So it now became like a status thing where people were now consuming meat because they felt like, if I have so much meat, then it means that I have money. It means that I'm affluent. It means that I've arrived. So that's what really instigated the level of meat eating. Because I can remember even when I was younger, as a child growing up in Nigeria, the amount of meat that we're eating now is nowhere near what we used to eat there. Because you used to just have like a tiny cube of meat now and again, some fish now and again. It wasn't like the foundation of our food. Like now, food is now based around meat, as opposed to be something that would be introduced into, which made it a very easy thing. When I was now writing my recipes and veganizing my meals, it was easier for me to do because meat was not the main, attraction. It was like a side
on the side or on the top, etc. I get you, Stefan.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was about to say something very similar to that. Thanks for it. I think it started even before colonization. I think, back to slavery even, right? Like, so, they took some of our people all the way to Caribbeans, and also obviously South America and North America. And as you can imagine, the slave master is not going to give the same food to the slaves. So they were eating the leftovers. And then, after that, centuries and centuries, they managed to make like amazing meal from those leftovers, like soul food. That's where soul food come from. But before that was not their diet. And in fact, if you control someone's diet, then you control their mind, right? So that's also part of what slavery was about. You need to control their mind in order to keep them your slave. So there was this. And then during colonization, so there's what she talked about, but also even within plant-based agriculture, there are many food that was introduced to us that was not necessarily native from the continent, and that was a way again to control people's mind.
And remove culture, remove people's culture.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sorry, that's what I meant by the mind. Absolutely, culture, and then they used to own the land, still do sometimes in certain area, and as a result, then your culture is gone. I think a good example of that is for grains. So we consume a lot of rice. We love rice in Africa, especially West Africa. I love rice as well. But the rice we eat today is not the wild rice that come from where we're from. It's not native to us. It's imported, usually from Asia, and that's what colonization is also about. The wheats we import and all these kind of things, although we have actually a lot of native grains that we could use and develop and that we used to prior to colonization. Grains like fonio, for example. I don't know if you heard of it, which is fantastic.
I ate it last week at my house. I must confess, I had a bag of it in the drawer for about 3 years.
Yeah, it's fine.
I just didn't mount the adventure. And in the end, my husband was like, I am cooking this. There you go. It was delicious.
Absolutely.
It was kind of slightly nutty.
Absolutely.
Background
very tiny and nutty. Absolutely.
A cross between like a quinoa large couscous hidden in the middle.
Absolutely.
Fonya, check it out, everyone. Buy it online. Get it from a specialist shop. Very interesting grain.
Absolutely. And super healthy. It's gluten-free. It has so much iron, protein, everything. And it's been cultivated in West Africa for over 5,000 years. But most people today, unfortunately, even within the West African community, don't necessarily know about it, except those who live where it's directly cultivated. But, it's still not what we use in our traditional dishes. We're going to use rice from Asia instead sometimes. But that's because, colonization, that's also what happened. So that existed within the animal agriculture industry, but also within the plant-based. And within the animal one, there is also milk, right? I mentioned milk before. growing up in Cameroon, was not a big thing for us, milk. However, I used to remember all the ads from, certain Western companies.
You can say Nestle.
Yeah. There you go. Well, you said
all over. Is it Milo and Nestle? The big posters whenever I traveled in Africa.
Everywhere.
Huge posters everywhere.
We used to sing with my sisters.
Having strong bonds and stuff.
There you go. Yeah. There you go. All that stuff. We used to sing it with my sisters and everything. So it's in brain, and at the same time, over 80 or 90% of Black people around the world are actually lactose intolerant, right?
Like what?
Lactose intolerance.
Lactose intolerance.
Lactose intolerance.
Right. So we, within Africa, so how come, we actually consume food that that we know actually we can't digest, right? And how come government allow this to allow this company to sell those products to us, right? So that's also what colonization is. Those deals that they have with certain leaders, African leaders, or corrupt one, I will say, who allow this to happen, right? And that's within Africa. And then you also have the issue within the diaspora, so in America and here. So you have the dietary guidelines, right, in Europe and in America. And when you look at those guidelines, you have milk there, right? It's been there for a very long time. You said strong bones, right?
Yeah.
We all heard that.
Yeah.
But if you have within your society, whether it's UK or America, a percentage of the population who cannot digest that, then it shouldn't be promoted to them, right? So that's also what colonization is about. It's within the diaspora, but also on our land back home. Unfortunately.
Thank you. Fantastic.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on about, like the foods. And, when you were saying about introduction of foods that were not our foods. Yeah. So when I was writing my cookbook, I managed to track down a very old cookbook that was written by an old, a white woman in 1912. And she settled in Igbo land. So it's actually called the Igbo Cookbook.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so I managed to track that down. It's a very rare book. Yeah, and I found it in the library in Harvard. So I managed to get access. And I was reading, it was so mind-blowing because half of the things that she was mentioning, half of the ingredients and stuff were things that we don't use now, were things that we don't cook with. For example, we're cooking back then with egusi oil. I had no idea that there was anything like that. Yeah. So that was like extracting oil from egusi. And it makes sense.
Which is a seed.
Which is a seed. Yeah, like the melon seed. That is high in oil and it's very nutritious. And it makes sense that was what they were cooking with. So many other things that I was able to find when I was doing the research for my book. And, it threw me because even some of the crops that I knew when I was growing up, nobody eats them anymore. And that's because it's been replaced by, different things and how people are eating now. Like I go to Nigeria quite often and I'm like out with people, I'm sitting in a restaurant, I'm seeing what people are eating and I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. Like I'm not used to seeing people like eat that amount of meat. You see one person at one sitting eating a whole chicken.
Wow.
And and after eating that, they will eat something else. Like, it's also meat-based.
Right.
So it's that whole way of replacing the natural way people used to eat with a different way for, I don't know how political I can be.
Very.
Go on.
For certain people's gain. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Of course.
So, it's incredible.
Of course. And, we've seen this around the whole of the world, even countries that were the colonizers, because they've let corporate control of the food system happen. The food varieties available, even in England and America and Belgium and France, where they were going out doing the colonizing, their food has completely shrunk as well in terms of the variety that the general population is eating. It's totally shrunk to the cash crops, to the things that can be farmed the easiest, the quickest, the cheapest, with the highest profit margin.
That's exactly what it is about.
So, it's
even
very
here,
global.
You could, there's wheat here. Like you could create create like an industry where you embrace the farmer and where you can create a sort of self-sufficient sort of nation, right? But instead, the UK import most of their food, right?
Everything.
There's no incentive to do that, right? So it's also a problem here, absolutely.
So, Nenna, you mentioned about meat being a status symbol.
Yeah.
I think this is in many nations, not just in Nigeria. Yeah. But when I traveled to Nigeria many years ago, I did really experience this because I was staying in a kind host family's house, very middle class, and it was really upsetting for them to serve me meals without meat. Very upsetting. Yeah. And they thought they were offending me. And so they would just give me small amounts of meat and little bits of meat. And so it was very difficult for me to eat in the house. And when they saw me eating like pan food, fried food in the market, they caught me out the car window. They got very upset because the neighbours would think they weren't feeding me and they weren't looking after the foreign guests. So, but I'm actually not being fed because I can't eat the meat. But it was very difficult for them. It was I could see I was putting them under stress. It was, not easy.
Yeah. So I also, obviously now everybody knows that I'm vegan. So people have come to accept it. Do you understand? So, and also like, when I'm out there in Nigeria, I do a lot of media. I go on radio, TV. So a lot of people have heard about veganism, if not anything, but I do like active promo when I go out there and I talk to them because I know when you come to speak to Africans about veganism, and you start talking about the ethical side, spiritual side, you lose them. So I usually come from the health side of things and tell them about the health benefits and stuff. But usually when I'm out there and, people would be like, oh my God, you mean you can't eat this or whatever? Or they were like, oh no, don't worry. We'll just take the meat out.
We'll just lift it off. That's I'm the world over. We've had that.
I'll just take the meat. I said, no, it's the fact that you've used the stock, you've used everything. I don't want to be part of it. I remember one time, you're talking about street food. It reminded me, I went out with my sister and we saw a lady selling bole. Bole is roasted plantain, like I said to you. And they usually do like a roadside thing with like pepper sauce and some fresh herbs and
Sounds
whatever.
Delicious.
Oh my God, it's incredible. As I'm talking about it, Anyway, back to the present. So I said to her, oh, I would like to have this. So the lady asked me, I said to her, no meat. And she said, oh, that's fine. All good. So she was making it, whatever. And then when she was, she put my, the plantain, and then she was putting the sauce, I saw bits of meat.
Little flecks, those little telltale flecks.
I said to her, hold on, madam, what is this? I thought I told you no meat. Do you know what she said to me?
It's just a sauce.
Wait, she said, madam, this is not meat now. This is omo.
And it's just like the stock, right?
No. You see, omo is the hide of skin. Like the skin.
The skin, yeah.
Right. Yeah, so that's like the that's the lowest of the low of meat. So when they feel like
can't count, that's not counted.
They don't count it. They don't count because that's like the cheapest sort of meat that you can have. Like people don't even regard it as meat. So when I said no meat, she thought I meant like beef.
Yeah.
Or maybe I didn't have money, so she would just slide it in there.
Yeah, hook you up with a little thing on top. Yes, yes.
So you can imagine.
Yes.
The impression.
And it's when you travel anywhere in the world, crossing that cultural divide of getting people to understand, doing it respectfully and doing it in a way that doesn't harm people's feelings. It can be very difficult when you're traveling. And if you don't speak the language, it's different when you're at home because you can obviously communicate in fullness.
Yeah, you can.
But when you're sat there traveling with your little sign that's written out in the local language saying, hello, I'm vegan, with pictures of animals and fish crossed out, and people are looking at you like, who is this girl? And why is she in my shop?
You know, the funny thing, I think things have really moved on.
Yes.
Because most places, like I travel quite a lot, and most places I go to, they would have a vegan place.
But they call it vegetarian, no?
Often. No, they have vegan. No, they actually have vegan places now in most places. And, it just makes life easier now. I remember, obviously, back in the day, it was crazy, but now it's so much better.
But also, I think, while it's amazing that they have all these new vegan places now, sometimes they actually have just vegan dishes that are vegan by nature, but they just don't label it as vegan. It's just red, whatever, it is what it is. But, you don't label it this way.
And red is a Ghanaian stew made of black-eyed peas. Why am I telling you? But I'm just telling the listeners so that they're like, what is that? And it's delicious. You should try it.
Yeah, basically, people should try that. You know, so, you know, things like that. And, you know, Africa is full of, you know, natural, those kind of dishes already. But yeah, it is true that sometimes you need to explain yourself a little bit more. Sometimes in full. But I think, as long as, you know, you do it respectfully, you know, it's fine.
It lands in the end. Can you guys tell me about some of the reactions you've had to choosing this life path? You know, it's not just your hobby or your eating style, it's your vocation, it's your mission. So what have some of the reactions been to your work?
Okay, so for me, like, you know, I used to be in entertainment.
Yes.
And I used to do more kind of like fun, loving things where, you know, meeting celebrities and stuff like that. That was what I used to post. Then all of a sudden, I'm posting about not eating meat. So I used to get a lot of like...
stick.
Yeah, I used to have so many people coming on, sending me like hate. It was really crazy. And you know, the funny thing is, after a while, people sort of kind of like understood and accepted me. So, and then there was this shift where people will now contact me like, oh, my parents have been told to stop eating meat. Can you help me with tips? So it has now shifted from that lack of awareness and, you know, what's she doing? Is she in a cult? Ooh, what's happened to her? Are you okay? Is it a phase?
Have you been brainwashed?
You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. Because people are always scared of what they don't know. So to now, people accepting it and even wanting to know more. Some people come to me, oh, do you know what? I'm trying vegan. Oh, I'm doing this. Oh, my child is now becoming vegan. What can you tell us, or how can you help us, you know, with all this? So, you know, there's been like a really major shift in thinking. And I think, people have accepted me for who I am.
And Stefan, how about you?
Yeah, me, to be fair, my family has been quite supportive at the beginning. I mean, they're still supportive when I started. And it's just that for some people, it was they didn't necessarily understand, which is fine, you know, which is fair. You know, it's something you know, why you do that and this kind of thing. So sometimes I had to explain myself, but I understand it, you know. So to be honest, it's been pretty positive, and my friend as well. You know, whenever we meet, you know, they ensure that there's the vegan option there, or if it's at their house or whatever, they're gonna cook something vegan as well. So to be fair, I've been quite lucky on that aspect. But yeah, I think it was more with sometimes with work as well, like at the beginning for me, because I didn't know much about it. So when I was out with colleagues or clients or these kind of things, so, you know, sometimes there was no vegan option, for example, right? So at the beginning, I was getting the veggie option. So that include dairy and eggs, when I couldn't find a vegan option. And but I realized also it was because of, you know, I didn't want to bother, you know, these feelings at the beginning. You
didn't want to cause, you know, a fuss.
Ask the chef to, can you remove and do this and that? So at the beginning, I was a bit like that. But that's because, again, I was not super well educated about certain aspects of veganism, and my why was not that strong at the beginning. Exactly.
So true, because once your why is there,
then you're going to find a way. You cannot. Absolutely.
You just do it, but the why must be there.
Exactly. Yes. So, you know, that's sometimes what I say when people, you know, ask, oh, you know, I want to be vegan and all that. What sort of, what can I do? And I think the stronger your why is, the easier it will be to go veggie. So, but yeah, in general, back to your question, it's been quite a positive one. Now there's always some people, you know, family and outside of family, you know, why do this and that and what's that, blah blah blah, and all these kind of things. But you know, I always try to you know, to talk about it in a positive way, and also to show them that I actually can be delicious. You know, my taste bud has not changed. You know, I still enjoy delicious food. Yeah, exactly. So, you know, whenever there's like Christmas or whatever, some sort of family gathering, always trying to show them as well that, hey, you can still enjoy your food while being vegan. So yeah, sometimes I let the food do the talking for me.
Let the food do the talking. It's the best type of activism. Has anyone tried to tell you it's anti-African?
Good question. Do you want to start?
Yeah, there had been a time obviously now I'm so happy to see plenty Africans recreating African dishes and stuff. And this is my 10th year being vegan. And when I first started posting about my cultural food vegan, it was crazy. People will be like, oh my God, our ancestors are rolling in their graves. It was so dramatic. And it was a thing where, because I started doing it because I couldn't find anybody's, I couldn't find any other person. So I started veganizing my own food. And it was a thing where I was kind of some of those foods I was posting was the first time some people were seeing those foods vegan.
Amazing.
And they're like, oh my God, what is this? Hey, our ancestors.
An abomination.
Jesus, abomination. That kind of a thing. Yeah. So it was...
It's nice to use that word, abomination.
I know.
Yeah.
So it was interesting, and it's still interesting. And the sort of person I am, I don't ever give up. And I knew that I had to keep doing it for people to kind of, start. So it was all right in the end.
Stefan, in your amazing debut cookbook, you talk about how veganism speaks to values of, and excuse my pronunciation, Ubuntu.
Yeah.
Can you explain a bit about that?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. So it's basically a sort of moral principle, an African moral principle that has been around for a very long time.
From South Africa or Zimbabwe?
It originated there, the
South
words.
Africa.
Mm-hmm, yep. Absolutely, but it's within the Bantu people as well, all across the Bantu tribe, which is from South Africa all the way to Central Africa and even a little bit west. It basically means I am because you are. So it's about understanding that I can't pronounce that word.
I am because you are.
Yes.
That's very beautiful.
It is. And it's about community. So it's about understanding that, you need to look after your community. And within community is also the environment and animals. So it's understanding that we sort of need each other in order to thrive. It highlights basically the interconnectedness. How do you say that?
Interconnectedness. You got it.
That's the word I was trying to find out. That's
right.
About interconnectedness, about people, animals, and planet. That is something that has been around, especially in countryside in Africa. In city now, it's a bit different, especially the big cities now in Africa, because people don't necessarily live next to their family and so on. So you don't necessarily have that sort of moral principle at top of your head. But especially in the countryside, you still have that, absolutely, Ubuntu. And to me, it's very much linked to what veganism is about as well, and what Ma'ats is about, which is what I was talking about before. It's really just that, understanding that every life should be respected, whether it's non-human animals or humans. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's an African concept.
It's very beautiful. And
profound.
It's very profound. And it's why I often say when I describe my veganism, many people say, I want to see a vegan world. Yeah. And I say, I do, but I don't want to include communities who don't access their food from the industrial food system and they're literally surviving off fishing and they live a very low impact life. Who am I to tell them how to live and that they would have to move location and move to the city? So I always, when I'm thinking of a vegan world, it's people who can and have the access and the means. If you have the access and the means, please make that choice.
That's the thing. And a lot of time, people who make that sort of comment can be vegan themselves. They're usually in the West and they say, but what about people back in Africa, whatever, how they can go vegan? You're here in London. You can go to the shop and get some veggies, right? So, but also I think sometimes there's this stereotypical stereotype or ideas or misconception that African people just live in rural area in mud huts and all these kind of things, and so you can't go vegan there, right? It's just they have no idea
just
how Africa looks
running around with what's it called, swaddle cloths,
correct,
with
exactly,
running around hunting animals,
exactly. So most people, they live in big cities, obviously even in countryside. I know a lot of vegans in countryside in Africa, and actually it's easier, I would say, to be vegan there because you have plenty of fresh fruit and vegetables. vegetables over there, you know? I'm often in touch with a friend of mine who's in countryside in Uganda, and you know he's been vegan like for I don't know, he's a kid, he's a 20 years old now, but he's been vegan ever since he was a teenager. I think it was because of his dog. He sort of realized, he made that connection, you know, and not influenced by, you know, Western media or anything. He's countryside Uganda, and he was eating whatever local fresh food and veggies that are there, and he's just fine with that, you know. So it's it's just a stereotype, really. That's what it is.
I do understand when people say veganism can be a sort of privileged choice because for some people, if you're accessing your food from a food bank or a food support service, very few of them provide plant-based or a complete plant-based option. So I do understand that, and that's why I always say means and access. Would you say in Nigeria, Cameroon respectively, and wherever you've travelled extensively in Africa, is it an accessible and affordable choice to be plant-based?
You want to start?
Okay. Go on. So if you think about it this way, when it comes to food, meat is usually the most expensive.
Right.
So by actually eliminating meat, you're actually having a cheaper meal. So do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
So there was a thing where for a short period of time, I don't know what happened, and there was kind of like a meat shortage in Nigeria, and a lot of people were sending me messages, I've now become vegan because of the price.
Just because I can't actually buy it. Yeah.
It was so funny. So you can imagine, like, at the end of the day, if you don't have that, you have other things to eat. Do you understand? Like, there's roasted corn is vegan, and it's something that people eat quite a lot. Pears are vegan, plantains are vegan, roasted yams are vegan, you know, vegetable stew, tomato stew with rice, with fonio, with, you know, those things are vegan. You don't necessarily have to have fish or meat or whatever, but these are like the foods that people eat most.
Absolutely.
Let me say West Africa, because I don't really know much about some other parts. And those things are vegan because all you need to do is take the meat out. And
and I will just add that sometimes people don't realize that those traditional dishes that you have in both our books, the base of it is actually just veggies, right? So it's actually vegan food. You know, we mentioned egusi soup. You know, if you remove egusi from egusi soup, then it's just meat. That's it.
100%.
Right? And therefore it remove the whole point of egusi soup. So, and same with dole, same with so many traditional dishes. It is usually centered around the veggies and the spice, right? And the meat just is like on top of it, right? So absolutely it is. I mean, I've been in Cameroon as a vegan. And super easy and never any problem. As long as you have fruit and vegetable pretty much everywhere on the planet, normally, except if you live in a desert or something like that. But fruit and veggies are pretty much everywhere, and they are usually affordable. Now, some of them, if they're imported and this kind of thing, they can be more expensive than others, certain fruit and veggies. But the local one, you go to the market and beans, I mean, you know what I mean?
Well, I was going to ask that. I was going to ask the most annoying vegan question. Where do you get your protein from? In West Africa. So what is it? Because, you know, in the UK, I have a very international diet. So I'm eating a lot of tofu and tempeh and edamame. Yeah. If you were having a local seasonal kind of diet in Nigeria, Cameroon, what kind of protein are you hitting your plate with?
We also have local tofu.
Local
called
tofu.
awara.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is also... Awara.
I can't say it.
Yeah.
Awara.
Awara. It's at the end.
Yeah, so it's actually locally... In fact, I sat with one of the Hausa chef, and she taught me how to make it, and I actually videoed it, which I'm hoping to edit.
Is it a bean?
It's still made from soya. It's the same process, but it's the bean is slightly more, let's say, nuttier. So it's a bit stronger than the tofu that you will find here. But I mean, it's really delicious, and it's an actual meal that you can actually buy from restaurants. So they can do spicy awara. But people think tofu they're not thinking that tofu is our.
No,
so sometimes it's the education and getting people to understand. Do you understand?
Yes.
And then like obviously you can still get your protein from rice, you can still get from beans and a whole lot of different vegetables you can still get your protein from.
Yeah, and I will just add that sometimes people forget that where the animals get their protein from, right? They get it from the plants anyway. So I think everything has protein except oil and sugar or something like that. So you're always going to have enough protein anyway, right? And then in terms of the local one, you have also things like bambara beans and these kind of things. But as we discussed earlier, a lot of those native crops and foods that we used to have are kind of like underused today because of colonization mainly, and so we sort of forget what we actually have locally, right? But then also, as she mentioned, for the tofu, you have many African nation who have sometimes similar products, but they will use different words for it because they have different languages, right? So you mentioned that for you is awara, right? I don't think we have that in Cameroon, but I think in Benin they have that as well. They used to call it cheese or something like that, but in French. And they've been, using this soy, fermented soy for hundreds of years. So yeah, it's been there for a long time.
Let's talk about fermented foods for a minute, because there's a fantastic fermented foods mini chapter in Nenna's book. Now, because I'm in London and I'm white British, my exposure to fermented foods had been East and Southeast Asian fermented foods and Eastern European, and I didn't even know much about like Mexican. Most cultures actually have fermented foods. But if I'm completely honest, and I'm slightly ashamed of this, I was surprised that there was fermented foods in Nigerian culture. How revealing is that? Like you just white supremacy gets on in there and gets in the brain, and it's really hard to shake it off. I was surprised. I know it's ridiculous, but I was. And since then, it's been amazing to discover the different ingredients, but can you tell us a bit about them, the uru and all these wonderful things you kindly introduced me to.
So if you think about it, like there was no free cheese and stuff like that. So it would make sense that some of their foods were fermented to keep, and some of them were obviously, I think some of it was like a discovery by obviously having things rot and then just playing around with food and things like that. So one of my favorite things, which I use quite a lot with Made in Hackney, is iru and ogiri. So these are like, will I say, nature's herbs and spices, like seasoning, for example, replacing things like Maggi cubes because they're not really good for you. So these are things that actually give flavors to foods. And for us who come from that background whereby you ate a lot of fish and stuff, and if you wanted to have like that fishy kind of like umami taste added to your foods, these are like the best kinds of ways to like flavor your foods, like iru and ogiri. So
iru is amazing. Is it? It says on the packet I've got, I think it says fermented carrots or locust beans.
Yeah, locust beans. Like iru is locust beans.
Right.
So they have different types of seed oils that can be fermented, right? So when it comes to ogiri, there are different types of ogiri. Ogiri is also similar to iru and dawa. So you can, like, even egusi seeds can be fermented.
Okay.
So there's ogiri obei, there's ogiri Igbo. So there are different types. So you can ferment. You can even ferment sunflower oil.
Okay.
There is
and fresh gari.
Okay.
Fermented?
So
no,
we do fermented cassava.
Yeah, I was about to say
okay,
that.
And fermented cassava would then be processed to be used either to make gari or for fufu. Which
are starchy carbohydrates, by the way, people served alongside a stew or a soup.
So if you think about the process of fermentation, it already breaks down the carbohydrates. So it makes it much more, will I say, easier on the stomach and easier to digest. So one of the things, because I was working with this organization that was trying to improve the exportation of foods from Nigeria and the quality of food exported. And one of the things that they had spotted was the fact that people were now skipping the fermentation process.
Right.
So that they can hasten the speed. So sometimes when you have Gary, which is the reason why I said to you, people need to read the labels when they're buying their foods. Because sometimes when you read the label, it says Gary not to be consumed without boiling or cooking first. And that's because they've skipped
the ferment process.
So if you go have it, like we have soaked Gary, you don't know what that is doing to your stomach.
Yeah.
So it's very important not to make sure that the foods that we're eating is fermented, because it's good for the system. And for us who are vegans and are not eating certain things, that's like nature's probiotic. It just goes straight into you, helps your digestive issues and stuff. Like sometimes when I find myself having I'm constipated or anything, I know people laugh at me when I say this. I just go into my fridge because I freeze my ogiri. One spoon, I'll just take it and just lick it. Because it smells really disgusting. People are like, oh. But when I take it, I find that, it really helps my gut bacteria. It brings a balance to your stomach. So, yeah, I can't talk about fermented food enough. And if you want to know more, go and buy my book.
I couldn't recommend it more. So tell us about the vegan scenes in Cameroon and Nigeria. Like, how big is it? How niche is it? Are there restaurants and cafes? Are there markets and meetups? Are there advocacy organizations? Tell us, what's it like at the moment? What's the size and the scale? Stefan, you start.
Yeah, sure. So Cameroon, it's nascent right now. So you don't have a lot of dedicated vegan restaurants. There's a few here and there. Otherwise, you have non-vegan restaurants who actually have vegan options. Again, they don't always label it as vegan, but you find it easily, and even street food as well. So that's not a problem. Now, in terms of outside of Cameroon, from my experience, so it's growing very fast. Now the main sort of quote-unquote markets is usually South Africa and Nigeria as well, but also Ghana and Uganda is becoming strong actually on this, especially in terms of activism. There's a lot of organization over there, and then North Africa as well is becoming stronger. So yeah, you have an organization called Thrive Africa. I don't know if you know them. They're part of Thrive Philanthropy, I believe. And I'm on a WhatsApp group with them, and we more than 400 sort of organization all across Africa.
So 400 Pan-African vegan organizations.
Yeah,
400
or more, maybe. Yeah, absolutely. There's
lots of them.
Wow. Oh yeah, unfortunately people here don't hear about them, right?
Yes.
Again, as I said, they think veganism is not a thing there, but it is a thing. You have a lot of activists out there working on many aspects, whether it's health, environment, but also ethics, talking about animal rights. They do marches, they do festivals. There's a lot. Every day I receive pictures of that. I'll show you after maybe. And it's really nice to see. It's growing. And yeah, they do their best to really to educate people. But what I like about it is they promote local foods, not necessarily the alternatives beyond meat and these kind of things. Is what do we have here? What can we do with it? And as we mentioned before, spice is what make it happen, right? So we mentioned a couple of them, things like dawa dawa and so on. And so it's understanding what local spice you can use, to recreate certain flavor.
Nenna is the queen of that.
I'm sure, yeah, absolutely. I can't wait to read the book. So there's so many ways to do that, it is growing absolutely.
Nenna.
Yeah. So when it comes to Nigeria, there's so many vegans in Nigeria. It's unreal. There's an actual university that's unwittingly a vegan university. So that university, there's no meats whatever sold on the on the campus and stuff like that. So many people have become vegan, obviously through that as well. So and there's an organization called Vegans in Nigeria, and they work very closely with ProVeg. So there's ProVeg Nigeria as well, and I've met with a lot of vegans, and I try my hardest whenever I'm in Nigeria to meet with as many vegans as I can. I do talks and stuff like that with them, and we do hangouts. And one of the things that they do, which I really commend, is that they do like beach cleanings. So they do like periodic, they go to the beaches and different beaches, and they go and just like clean and whatever. So they do a lot of advocacy work. There's some restaurants in Nigeria that's vegan. There's some vegan chefs as well who actively do like deliveries if you need that. So anything you can think of and you want now is really available for you when it comes to veganism. You know, like I thought maybe it was just in Lagos and Abuja being like the biggest cities, but no, there are vegans like all over. And because of what I do, I get vegans all over Nigeria reaching out to me. And as far back as in my hometown, there was a vegan. And when they heard about me, they were so excited and they reached out to me, oh my God, I'm vegan too. So, you know, you get a lot of that. And, you know, it makes me so happy from the first time I went to Nigeria to now. The movement is incredible, and you'll be surprised. And like you mentioned, apart from the vegan restaurants, there are also restaurants that actually provide vegan options, which was one of the things that I do as well. Like when I go to different restaurants, I'm like, okay, so you have this. Why haven't you labeled it vegan? And they'll be like, oh, okay, we'll do that. And I'll be like, okay, if you do this, you have more vegans coming here. That's an opportunity. Because they see you and, you know, they can't come because it's intimidating. They don't know you have it. Do something. And sometimes I go and follow it up to see if they've done it.
You know, it's so funny you say that. I find it really hard to switch off my free consultancy radar when I eat in any restaurant. I cannot help it. I'm like, have you thought about labeling this or taking this away or putting this over here?
100%.
Or I just can't help myself. I just, it's like just ingrained.
But that's the thing, they need this education. Actually, I know one in Nigeria as well. His name is Luna. So he's the founder of My Vegan Africa. And he's working with all the chefs over there in Nigeria, but also outside of Nigeria, to educate them about veganism, plant-based diet, why they should have that on their menu, how they can improve their menu, and how they should label it as well, and so on. And they're very interested. The first time he actually posted something online about that event, he's got over 60 people who sign up, chefs in Nigeria who are not vegan. They just want to find out, let me learn more about that. So they're open to it more and more. And it's great.
Fantastic to hear. So now I'd like us to talk about masculinity and veganism and masculinity, because I feel like the meat industry has done a real number on associating meat eating with strength, virility, masculinity, being a real man, blah, 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 blah. Stefan, what are you saying?
I was going to say, that's not my area. Yes, you can, you can take that away.
I think, so many things to talk about here. I think it require strength to not follow the crowd. Does it make sense? Right? And the crowd is non-vegan in general. So, if you talk about strength, actually, it's actually harder to stand, to not follow the crowd. So that's one aspect, that, I will say, in terms of masculinity and veganism out there. And also, I believe that, man, it's about men, we're supposed to protect, right? And so that means also, outside of the human sort of aspect, so we should also consider non-human animals as well. And in a sense, I think it's about understanding that we have a responsibility as well to protect those who can't defend themselves, right? We do that for kids, so why not with non-human animals? And I think that's a masculine aspect, that I understand that if you have quote unquote power, right, then you should actually what's the word? Power gives responsibility, right? So you should be responsible to protect those who can't defend themselves. I think that's a masculine role as well. And then, I think there's just nothing, how can I say that? It's just not like, it's just a misconception really to think that only female should care about their health, the environment and animals,
have compassion.
And have compassion, which is just human values that are shared all across genders really. So I just think it's a huge misconception. There's plenty of vegan male out there. Sometimes it's seen because people you mentioned like the marketing aspect, how you need to eat meat to be strong and all these kind of things, right? Where actually it's quite the opposite from a health point of view. The more meat you eat, the more weak you are, right? So it's a contradiction in a way, to be honest. So what masculinity are you talking about here?
I read in one of your interviews, you said something really funny. You said, I don't know how masculine it is hunting for meat down the supermarket aisle.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
really made me laugh.
Absolutely. How masculine is this? Like it makes no sense.
Into the basket.
Exactly. Like because sometimes people see themselves like eating meat like, as if they're killing an animal themselves or anything like that, but they can't even watch slaughterhouse footage. So what masculinity are you talking about, really? So no, I think. My whole point is more about it requires strength to not follow the crowd. So, yeah.
And then I can actually ask you a similar question.
Go ahead.
Because, meat is pushed on women as something that's essential at various stages. When you hit puberty, to give you iron for your period, during pregnancy, perimenopause, menopause. A lot of misinformation is out there that says we need to be eating meat when we don't. So, what are your thoughts conversely on how meat eating is pushed on to the feminine?
Okay. Like from when I was young, I've always had a thing where like my iron has always not been 100%. So from getting me to eat loads of, will I say, kidney, livers, and they're like, oh, that's what you need to eat to, push your iron up and all the rest of them. And, getting older and then becoming vegan, and I understand, that's not the only way you can get, And the funny thing is, now that I eat less meat, I actually have more iron. So what was that all about? You understand? So I think it's that impression that that's the only place that you can get certain things from, and it kind of stops people from really exploring what actually your body needs, what is really wrong with you, is there an alternative, and that sort of thing. So I always tell people, be open-minded about things, always try to understand. If you can avoid, for example, some people I know who have now kind of like, let's say, left veganism and are now eating more kind of meat. That was one of the reasons why they had to leave, because they're like health issues and stuff like that they would have to now eat meat to actually sustain.
And shout out, I work for an organisation these days called Plant-Based Health Professionals, and it is full of incredible fact sheets, information. And it really just blows out of the water so much misinformation about a plant-based diet being, not suitable when we know it is suitable for 100%. Every stage of life. We're talking cradle to grave and is really beneficial for many different diseases. I'm not a medical professional, so look at the fact sheets because they are by medical professionals.
As you know, I just completed the
Winchester University Plant-Based Health Professionals Training course. Whoop whoop, Nenna. So what's the qualification title?
It's plant-based nutrition.
Plant-based nutrition.
Yeah.
It's the first of its kind in a university in the UK where medical professionals can choose to elect to take the plant-based nutrition module and build it into their medical studies.
Yeah, well done.
And the most amazing part of it, because you actually get access to people who you would probably not have had access to, where I had a lot of the questions that I wanted answered by proper people who have done proper research. So it was amazing, incredible.
I'm so glad you did that course.
Yeah.
Just when she was talking about feminism and femininity within veganism and all that, I had in mind, dairy, right? Like, how can it be masculine to drink some, to steal breastfeed from a cow when you're an adult and a male? Doesn't make any sense to me.
Milk snatcher,
you know what I mean?
baby cow milk snatcher.
It's for babies, right? Like, and you grown up man, and you talk about veganism being about a female thing. Like, it makes no sense.
But I remember the ads whereby they had like the milk mustache.
Yes, of course.
God, that was.
Yeah.
Of course. Nenna teaches the most amazing classes at Made in Hackney. And for anyone who's not heard of Made in Hackney, it's a charity and community cookery school that I founded about 12 years ago. It's a plant-based community cookery school that does lessons all around the UK, predominantly in London, inspiring and empowering people to grow, cook and eat more plants. And Nenna is one of the charity's phenomenal teachers. I'm no longer full-time at the charity. I'm an ambassador, but I will never forget every single class Nenna did. Full waiting list, full attendees, roadblock, people blowing up the phone, the email. Can I get a place on Nenna's class? Can I get a place on Nenna's class? But it just really showed how needed it was.
Yeah.
And what we found for many of the participants, particularly Black women of, Afro-Caribbean heritage, they were saying this food, Nenna's food, and the healing aspect of the food, the plant-based aspect of the food, but it being culturally appropriate. They had never had this service provided to them before. They'd gone to the doctor in the UK, or if they lived in another country before, like America, because it's a very, international crowd at Made in Hackney. They were always being told to eat foods that had nothing to do with what they were familiar with. And we could really see that people were starved of this information. And you brought that, Nenna. And it was, for many women, it was quite emotional. I could see how moved they were to finally get this information.
Yeah. You see, one of the things that I had to do, like, because I work in a community as well for my other thing that I do, apart from vegan cooking, which I'm not going to hype here, but I have access to certain things. And I was looking through this booklet that was prepared for by the Heart Foundation, and they were trying to encourage it was actually specifically written for the Black community, for African and Caribbeans. And they created kind of like some meal plans, recipes and whatever. And I said, you know what, let me actually look at this thing. And I looked at it and I'm looking at things like, instead of frying dumpling, why don't you air fry dumpling? Instead of frying puff puff, why don't you air fry puff puff? I'm like, do you even know what dumplings?
What is it?
And puff puff, how can you air fry? It's incredible. And I'm like, meaning that they've not consulted anybody from these communities, do you understand? To find out, okay, what is this actual food? So when it comes to like the health industry, I like calling it industry because we know that's what it is. Yeah. And the way things are approached, whether we like it or not, the society that we live in UK is multicultural, and there'll be people there. And what I've noticed is because the, will I say, more ethnic communities are not actually being looked out for.
They're not being served. They're not being served.
And because of that, there's an overrepresentation of us in the health system that shouldn't be, because of the lack of information and the misinformation. And it makes it difficult. And the thing is, it only takes one tiny thing to change these things. And that tiny thing can actually create a shift in the way things are approached. And there'll be, will I say, better results and better expectations from some of these things that are supposed to be implemented, which are like, it was such a great idea that they would want to do something like that, create a brochure, a handout.
But they didn't deliver.
But they did not.
Yeah, I mean.
So I've actually created a counter.
Of course you have.
You know me, which I'm hoping that one of the bosses would have a look at. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Just wanted to add on her point about the fact that we're overrepresented within, hospital and all that, unfortunately.
And by that, overrepresented in terms of patients.
In terms of patients, obviously. That's what we were talking about.
From a health inequalities perspective.
Absolutely.
Black and brown community members are suffering from steeper health inequalities.
More than others. So, in other words, basically, the African diaspora is dying faster than everyone else, whether it's here in the UK, in France, or in America.
And it's chronic lifestyle disease.
It's chronic lifestyle disease, absolutely, because these are the number one leading cause of death, right? So I think we all have someone in our family who's got, one of those, I'm not going to mention them, but,
we know them,
diabetes, all that stuff. And sometimes it's because of two reasons. It's not nothing wrong with their gene in the way they were born, but usually it's lifestyle. So, it's about where they live and what they eat. And so, where they live sometimes, fortunately, it's area that has much more like fast food than other areas, these kind of things, right? So here it's like the chicken shop and all these kind of things. In France, like kebab and this kind of thing. And then in America, it's more like pizza and burgers and all this kind of thing, right? So when that's what you have around you, and it's cheap as well, so you're going to be more likely eating these things compared to others. So at the end of the day, you end up with more of those chronic disease. And sometimes, as you mentioned, that, we don't, there's like these stereotypes that veganism or plant-based diet is not necessarily for us. And therefore, those people who believe that, then they're not going to think, I can change with just my diet, right? So instead, they end up having pills, for the rest of their lives. And that's a huge problem. And it just, the main problem here was just the fact that they had this stereotype in their mind, which affect their health at the end of the day, which is terrible.
It is terrible.
So it's amazing what you've done. For example, basically, it's amazing.
I started a community cookery school, and the community came and said, "Thank you, we need this," and they rolled with it.
Yeah.
Like the teachers came, the people came. All I did was get the party started.
But that's what was needed.
And then everyone came and built it and made it their thing. It was amazing to watch. Amazing to watch.
That's what is needed. And it's amazing that you managed to do that and show that there's a different face about what a vegan looks like.
100%.
And you don't have to compromise on your culture in order to be a vegan, which is very important.
And also, what's been beautiful about Nenna's classes in particular, it showed not just how starved the Black community was in the UK of that knowledge and that experience, but all sorts of other people who love the world and are curious about the world, who are like, I would love to learn how to make moi moi and fold the parcel and use the palm leaf. And,
because now people actually tell me, this is what we want to learn. And sometimes I'm like, how did you know about that? Because it's not something that's popular. And, people want to, like, everyone talks about, fufu, egusi. But when people come up with certain dishes, you're like, wow.
And when we did online classes during the pandemic, one white lady switched her voice on to speak, and she looked really emotional at the end of the class, really emotional. And she said, "Thank you, Nenna." And we were like, what's she going to say? And she said, "I've been reading about Nigerian food in novels for 2 decades. And because I'm vegan, I've never been able to try any of it." And she says, "Now you've brought alive all this food that I've been reading about in novels for 2 decades." Do you remember her?
From Chimamanda Adichie's books.
I love her.
Some of those,
And
dishes.
it meant so much to her.
You forgot about the person in Malaysia that couldn't get access, and I had to teach her how to make pap from scratch. And she had to go get the corn and ferment it before the actual class. You forgot that one?
Wow, yes. The online classes were real. Nenna went the extra mile to make sure everyone got. And one participant was amazing. It was an older gentleman who was just going to watch.
Yes.
And his kids sat him in front of the lesson and then they just brought him the food at the end. It was classic. And you clocked this and you were like, Uncle, I see you're not cooking. And he's like, switched on and went, no, just eating. It was brilliant.
It was amazing.
It was a special time, a really special time. Stefan, last year, I believe it was last year, yes, you did the inaugural Pan-African Plant-Based Food Alliance event at the Africa Centre.
That's true.
Tell us about that event and why it was special and what it meant to everyone who attended. I was gutted I couldn't go.
Yeah, that's okay. No problem at all. Basically, we've just talked about it, right? So I think for me, in the West, like one of the main issues is that stereotypes that we have, that veganism is like Western trend, and that was, I think, the title of the event. And the idea is simply to show that it's not the case. Obviously, by having vegans from the African diaspora and Caribbean as well, to tell their stories, because I believe like people are inspired by people's stories, personal stories. Why is it that they decided to go vegan? What challenge they had, if they had any, and how they can support others and what work they're doing and all these kind of things. Thanks to you, I think I had Sharon from
Sharon Gardner, Made in Hackney Chef.
There you go. Absolutely.
Long time.
Absolutely. So it was great to hear, because she's been vegan for so long. It was great to have her as well over there. And I try to have like people from different sort of age as well, so everyone can relate to the speakers. And so the idea was simply to debunk that misconception in an official way. Everyone, part of the community know that there's no such a thing of veganism being just a Western trend, but it was important, I think, to show it. So that was one of the aspects. And then also for those who just wanted to learn, a lot of people, they're not necessarily vegan themselves, but they're questioning themselves. Oh, is it a good thing for me? Okay, let me find out more.
Vegan curious, plant
curious. Exactly. That was the goal, actually. It was not to have just vegans here. The goal was to have as much non-vegan as possible. In fact, I asked the question at the beginning of the event, and so we had a good balance, actually.
Excellent. We want that.
Vegan, which is exactly what we wanted.
If anyone's not vegan and listening to this, we love you. Thank you for listening. Stay with us.
Yeah, totally. And because for me, my approach is the fact that, there was a time when I was not vegan as well, right? So, what kind of person I would like to back then. Exactly, right? So it's about being conscious of that as well. There was the first sort of hour was about why of veganism, and then after that, the how. So I did a partnership with their local restaurants, which is called the Little Baobab. So it's a Senegalese restaurant, really amazing. Everyone should go there. It's not a vegan restaurant, but again, they have vegan options. So I managed to have like a plant-based menu with just West African food. So we had akara, there was fonio, there was jollof, there was all that stuff. And it was again for people to understand that, yes, I can go vegan without compromising on my culture, and actually taste it and enjoy it. So that was one of the aspects. But it was a very successful event. We had over 60 people who turned up. We didn't have enough chairs as well for some people, unfortunately.
Always a good sign. That's fine by me. I like all my events to be roadblocked with too many people there. I like that. Some people don't like it. I like that.
Yeah, true. But at the same time, you want them to feel comfortable. But I understand. But so that was kind of what it was about. And also, obviously, we launched the book at the same time. And that was
and should we expect more events, other locations, other cities?
Hopefully, absolutely. I can't wait. I have a lot of projects about it. Now, the problem is, we talked about it before we came, fundraising, right?
Fundraising.
Yeah, they should remove the fun part of it. Because it's not always fun, right?
There's no fun in fundraising.
There's no fun in fundraising, exactly.
And before the show, I was sharing why I left Made in Hackney full time. I'm now an ambassador for the charity, a proud ambassador ambassador. It'd always be my first baby. Yeah. But 12 years of fundraising was exhausting.
It is exhausting.
And I loved it with every cell of my being, but I couldn't fundraise anymore. And it's why I sort of had to step away. And I felt really sad about that. But it's why you're looking for a different model.
Exactly, yeah. I'm trying to, right now, I'm working on actually on a business. So it's basically a startup kind of business related to that. I'll be able to share more once it's live. But the idea is to not rely too much on donation and grants, because
that's exhausting.
One is exhausting. Two, again, you're not guaranteed to get it, and it takes a lot of time to get it anyway. So, and those events still need to happen. So I need to find another way to generate income and to fund these projects. So one of them one of the projects I would like to do within the next 2 years is a festival, so like a Afro Veg Fest here in the UK.
Yes, please.
And the idea is to have people like her, all the people involved within the community to do talks and share their experiences, but also to have all these amazing Black-owned restaurants who can show their products, their dishes, whether it's Caribbean or African, and to provide a sort of safe space like that for the community. So for people to come and learn, and enjoy food as well. So, but again, it takes a lot of time and money. So I need to sort that first before doing it. Yeah.
Well, best of luck with that, because we need it and we want it, don't we? We need it and we want it. Just to talk a little bit about veganism and climate change. So obviously, African nations have not caused the climate crisis. We realize that. So how much is the climate crisis part of the conversation about veganism on the continent, or in Nigeria and Cameroon? I'm not expecting you to speak for the entire continent, but is that part of the conversation or not really? Is it more a health focus? Because, it's such low emissions coming out of Africa versus America, England, etc.
Yeah, do you want to start?
Okay, so like you said, it's not really something that they're too concerned about. So, like I said to you, whenever I'm out there, people really just want to know about the health benefits of being vegan, and that usually is what I focus on when I'm out there. So obviously, I do tell them about let them be aware of what's happening when it comes to all those things, but they're really not too keen. And if you think about it this way, people who are struggling to eat, they're not really concerned about the environment, because it's not something that they can relate to, like the environment. Yeah. So they want something they can relate to, and usually is health. But I mean, there are a few people who are kind of like clued up on that, but not.
Yeah, I think, as you said, I think there's two types of people in general, kind of like here, I would say. So you have those, especially in big cities, health are their main concern by far, absolutely. And however, I think you have certain, indigenous tribe over there out there who are basically understand better, I think, than everyone else, their environment, and they can see the change over time. So, they're affected by the droughts and these kind of things, so they know what's going on. And so you have that, and then you still have a couple of activists here and there, depending on the countries. I mentioned a couple of them earlier. These is where they are in general. And so within the activism, they try to include it. However, it's not always the first thing that they bring up. So health, again, is usually the number one. But sometimes they still mention it. It's just not popularized so much. We don't hear too much about their work, unfortunately, because they're not huge organization. They are small, organization, or spread out all across the continent. But when I look at what they do, the environment is still there, but again, it's not. They don't have this huge visibility, and that is one of their challenge: visibility. Along with funds, because you never have funding. always. So, and that's the problem. They struggle, to get mics and to get things like that, to go to schools and then talk about it. But they do that. They do a lot of work with schools. There's a lot of work with schools. So they cook for the kids and so on, and then give a speech with universities as well, these kind of things. So I can see a lot of work in that, but again, it's not mainstream yet. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, it's Africa, contribute, I think it's 2% of global emissions.
When you look at the land mass and the population, it's exactly kind of negligible. Really.
Yeah, but at the same time, you hear certain politicians in the West saying that, this is going to be a problem with Africa because we make too much babies or whatever, this kind of thing. So, this human population thing, which to me is a bit ridiculous because, if we are more in terms of numbers than here, but actually we contribute the less to CO2 emission, that means that it's about how we live our life. That means it's about lifestyle. It's not necessarily about how many we are in the planet, right?
Absolutely.
So it's more about what we decide to eat, to do, that impact more rather than just having a lot of human beings. Because how come like a small nation like France, in terms of population, 67 million compared to Congo, which is much more, or another one, like how come one contribute much more to global climate change compared to that African nation, right? It doesn't make sense. So it's within the policies people or environment. You hear a lot of that, and it's a huge misconception, I believe. So yeah.
I'd like Nenna to talk now about the demonization of single ingredients. And I'm sorry to ask you to do this labor again, because you've done it many times in our classes. You've done it for the Made in Hackney cookbook. You've done it in your own cookbooks. One more time, please. Can we talk about palm oil?
I knew that was coming.
I tried to brace you. I braced you for it. I braced you for it. Obviously, in the UK and the US, in very sort of white vegan movement, palm oil is very much demonized. Let's talk about why and how that's really a misrepresentation of it.
Okay. So, when obviously people are right in thinking that there might be something wrong with palm oil, right? However, what people who talk about it don't do is actually give you more information for you to make your choices, right? So when it comes to palm oil, what they're talking about is actually palm kernel oil, which has been, will I say, commercialized and used in our skincare products, in many products that we use, in some chocolates, in some food items and stuff.
And this is the palm oil from the Amazon, right?
Yeah.
Which is hurting the orangutans and all that jazz, right?
Yeah, that particular palm oil is not from Africa.
Shall we say that again?
I tried to tell it's not from Africa.
Yeah, Southeast Asia.
It's from Southeast Asia, right? And these places, obviously, for them to be able to farm the amount of palm oil that's needed for the West to be able to create certain, things, it has to be done in volume. And for that to happen, there needs to be clearing of forests and different things to be able to plant these things, okay? Unlike in Africa, especially West Africa, where palm trees are actually native to the land. That's the origin, where they originate from. Like in my hometown, like my sister has, she actually has a, will I call it, I don't like using the word plantation because it could symbolize certain things to different people.
Right,
but she has a palm oil farm. Okay.
Small holding.
Yeah.
People love the word small holding. It sounds friendly.
Yes. Yeah. So, but the technical term
is plantation.
Yeah. However, like those palm trees, the nuts fall and germinate. So there's no active farming of them, right? Because that's how they're native to the land. So it's not, there's no deforestation, there's no orangutans being, wiped off or whatever for palm oil that comes from West Africa to be made. So if you're trying to cook and you're looking to get palm oil, because I've also seen cooking palm oil that comes from places that's not West Africa, I don't buy them, right? So when you're trying to buy palm oil, please look at the label, find out where it's actually coming from. If you're in doubt, ask the shopkeepers, where have you actually gotten this oil from? Mm-hmm. So that's what I usually say to people. But if you want to know more, please buy my book.
More in the book, but such important wisdom, because
it is.
This applies to so many things. If we don't look deeper, we don't look at the full story, we just go with the screaming headlines.
100%.
It's not giving us a full picture.
Which is what I do, like before I start my classes, because palm oil is one of the biggest,
hot topic.
Yeah. And also the ingredient that I cook with a lot. So I always try to educate with that. And then when it now comes to like sustainability, the palm tree is one of the most sustainable trees ever, because all parts of the palm tree is actually used for something. The bark is used for generating fire, like fire when you're cooking with firewoods and stuff like that. You use it to light up your fire. You use the bark also for medicine. I'm a herbalist, so herbal medicine, we use a lot of that to make medicine. It's good because the oil you get from palm tree is good for healing the skin, high in vitamin E, which is the reason why it's sought after. You get palm wine from palm trees, which is really nice, refreshing drink. I like palm wine. And I've made palm wine mimosas. Out of that, I created different cocktails that are palm wine influenced. You can use all parts. You can also even have the palm nuts, which people actually eat with roasted corn. So there are different things that you can do with the palm tree. So it kind of like hurts me when I hear people talking about palm oil, boycott palm oil.
Just a blanket
because they don't
term.
actually know. Yeah, and many, communities, this is their livelihood. They're sustained by palm oil sales and stuff.
Yeah, I would just add, I echo everything she said as well, that obviously we as Africans also need to be careful about who tomorrow will own the land or who currently own those lands, because then, there's different type of interest and different kind of care as well for the land, because, if tomorrow, there's a huge boycott about the Southeast Asia sort of palm oil, then those companies who need to use this palm oil might come to Africa instead and start doing the same thing. So we also need to be careful about it, not letting them taking the land and then doing the same thing that they've done in Southeast Asia. So it's just something that we need to, keep an eye on.
How can people support, get involved with, or be good allies to the Pan-African plant-based movement?
Education first, I would think. So, understanding what we talk about, what we're trying to do. First of all, within the community. So the first word is Pan-African, right? So that comes from a movement which is called Pan-Africanism. So it's a movement that was actually created within the diaspora. So that was in Brazil during slavery, and then in the Caribbean islands, especially in Jamaica, with people like Marcus Garvey, for example. So the idea is simply the fact that the understanding that whether we speak Swahili in East Africa or Xhosa in South Africa or Ewondo in Cameroon, or Spanish in Cuba, or English in the UK or in North America, we all basically African, and we all come from the same place, originally speaking. So we are sort of branches of the same trees, and so share common roots. And so that's the idea of Pan-Africanism. Understand is first that we are one nation in general, branches of the same trees. So that's the first aspect. And therefore, because we are we share the same past and the same roots, we have a common future as well. And so because of that, we should unite together to first get to know each other, and also to fight for the same problem that we have, whether it's neocolonialization in Africa or struggle within the diaspora. And it's about understanding that we have more in common that what's the opposite?
What separates
That's what
you.
separates us, absolutely. So there's this aspect within the Pan-Africanism, and the global objective of it is to gain our collective independence and sovereignty in order to unite with the rest of humanity. That's the whole aspect of Pan-Africanism. So yeah, there's that, and then how to support that. So it's first education about this, and then about the other aspect, which is plant-based lifestyle. So understanding the roots of it, understanding that it's not a Western trend. So all this education that we're talking about, and then the actual support. Well, there's a book right now, so obviously people can read that if they want to.
That. We don't want them just reading it. We want them purchasing.
They can do that. They
yeah.
can do that absolutely if they want to. Yeah. So that's one way, and then just following us, and then take it from there.
And we haven't got time, alas, to talk about it on this show. But on many of the themes you talked about, if people just have an internet search of what's going on in Burkina Faso right now in terms of self-sufficiency, self-reliance, kicking out colonial powers, saying no to the IMF, etc. There's some really fascinating things happening in Burkina Faso, but I'm afraid we haven't really got time to talk about that, but do check it out, people, because there's a lot of inspiration.
EAS is the Alliance of Sahel States, and they are basically the example for other African nations right now. Yeah.
My final question for you both. We are living through some really turbulent times right now. It feels like the world is on fire. And as compassionate, emphatic people, sometimes that can be really hard to live through. What gets you up every day, inspired, doing what you do?
Right. So for me, I try to look at the world from the positive side, and I try to do what I can just to kind of like encourage, bring cheer, and because it's so easy to be brought down by what the things that are happening at the moment. It's so super easy. And for someone like me who is an empath, I always it bothers me, but I try to always look at the bright side. What can I do to make a change? What can I do to influence, do something different? Like I had forgotten to talk about my magazine, which is the
Vegan Melanated,
which is the, will I say, the only at the moment Black vegan magazine. I try to look at people who are doing amazing stuff, where there's anything positive happening. We try to showcase that to kind of like counter the negative voices out there, to show that, you know what, there's still positivity happening on the planet. So,
thank you. Thank you.
Very nice.
Stefan.
I think, it's about, sometimes it can be overwhelming, all these, everything that happens.
Very overwhelming, yes.
Absolutely. So, it's about just, step by step, basically. I think that's kind of me, how I try to do it. You can't do everything all at once. I used to be that guy who think, I can do all this stuff, but it's not realistic. It's not healthy either, especially from a mental health point of view. So step by step, you can't fix everything. We mentioned about palm oil before. Yeah, it's great to be aware of that. Okay, if sometimes tomorrow or that palm oil is actually not the right one, all right, okay, tomorrow you do better. That's fine, So also being, what's the word?
Compassionate to yourself.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Absolutely. Thank you. Absolutely. We talk a lot about compassion to others, but it's important also to be compassionate to ourselves, and understanding that this is a journey, like no one is perfect on the planet, no one. So do your best every day. That's it, step by step. You know, even, you know, as vegan, sometimes when you become vegan, you think, oh, there you go, you reach that total ethic sort of aspect. But there's so much things that you can improve.
There's so many more things we can do.
Absolutely. For your health, there's so much thing, you know, because not all vegan food is healthy. You know, things like alkaline food, you know, I'm looking more into that now, which I know it will be healthier because it's just nature stuff. But do I eat that every day? No, I don't, you know? So, you know, and it's important to be kind with yourself as well, understanding that it's a journey. Take it easy. That's it. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
It was the most wonderful and rich conversation, and I cannot wait for us to share it with the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you again.